Well, thank you for joining us for another iTWire interview series with top Australian executives. Joining us today is Jeremy Deutsch. He's Managing Director of Equinix Australia. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Alex, for having me.
So to start with, can you please tell us a little about Equinix and maybe a little bit about your history with Equinix?
Sure. So Alex, probably to give you the best understanding of Equinix, maybe I'll start back at why we were created, when we were founded. So we were founded in 1998 in the US. And our founding was basically to create an environment where companies can come and interconnect and exchange their traffic. Fundamentally, this was done right at the sort of genesis of the internet, and to try to create a business-grade capability for connecting on the internet and around all of the digital platforms that were occurring around the late 90s and early 2000s.
And they were the boom times for sure. I mean, which has only boomed even further since.
Exactly, certainly. So we fundamentally created environments in numerous locations across the US where you can create these interconnection points. So we have a platform of interconnection points built on top of our world-class data center environments. We now have moved over the years from those sites in the US to having over 100 sites around the world, and we're now the world's largest carrier-neutral data center provider, providing fundamentally interconnection from all of those different markets that we operate in.
Now, currently we're sitting inside of the Sydney 3 data center. I was here a couple of years ago for the launch, and it was very impressive. You took us on a special tour and all high-level security. What are the types of customers that need this ultra high-level, super advanced data center?
So it's an interesting model. So we support customers across 5 major areas. So the first one, again, back to the fundamentals of the internet, is all the networks. Yeah. So we look after a lot of infrastructure for network service providers around the world. As an example, in Australia, we have over 130 network service providers in our Sydney campus environment, as an example. And fundamentally, those guys are enabled to interconnect, buy and sell services between each other, and then provide services to other companies as well. So that's one example. If you look into a very on-trend space at the moment, which is cloud service providers. Mm-hmm. So the cloud is obviously a new paradigm that many organizations are trying to take advantage of. We support cloud platform providers all around the world. Good examples of that are Amazon, AWS, Microsoft Azure, and again, as a good example in our Sydney facilities, Sydney campus, you can get direct connectivity to an Amazon Direct Connect service or a Microsoft Azure service. So if you're building a hybrid cloud architecture, you can leverage those guys in addition to all of the network service providers that are already here as well. So that gives you 2 flavors. When you look further, once you have a lot of those networks and all those cloud service providers, enterprise customers, people who are running their own IT shops, are looking at how they can leverage these different environments and fundamentally create innovation inside their IT architecture. And to do that, you want to put yourself in a location where you can leverage the different platforms that are available. Maybe public cloud providers, might be private cloud providers, maybe network services. And once you get that model, you can then roll that out with us globally, as we have all of these locations in the same environment set up all around the world. Then there's some maybe less well-known spaces that we operate in as well. So another example is financial services. So around the world we support a lot of stock exchanges. And again, as a good example, in Australia we look after Chi-X and their platforms, and a lot of the market participants that trade stocks and provide market data services, including companies like Bloomberg. So as you can appreciate, the robustness and the resilience and the security that are required for those guys flows through to the benefit of all of the participants inside our ecosystem. And then I guess one of the other areas is the sort of online internet web space type environments. We call that digital content. So that's the online environments as well, and of course we support those too.
Sounds extremely comprehensive. You mentioned Bloomberg as one of the customers. Who are some of the other ones that you're able to mention? I'm sure some of them are top secret, but...
Yes, yeah. As you can appreciate, being a data center provider, a big part of our philosophy is security, and that's physical security as well as commercial security about operations that are running with us. There are a few customers that we can mention. So we have over 500 in Australia as far as our customer set. So a lot of the network service providers are customers. So as an example, even recently we announced we have a new service in our new facility in Melbourne with Telstra. Another one would be Vocus. Those are good examples of network service providers that we support across our national footprint. In addition to those, Chi-X I mentioned already, Bloomberg, there's a lot of different companies, different types inside our mix.
Now you mentioned having a massive global footprint. What does the Australian footprint look like? You mentioned Melbourne, and we'll come back to that in a sec.
Sure.
We're in Sydney 3, but where else do you have data centers in Australia?
So globally, as I mentioned, we have over 100 sites around the world. So we're very well placed across all of the Asia-Pac region, into Singapore, Hong Kong, Tokyo, in Osaka as well, and Jakarta.
Very handy for the Asian century that we're in.
Correct, and into the US and then into Europe. When you consider Australia, we have 3 sites in Sydney, and we have 1 site now operational in Melbourne.
So that's the brand new one that just launched late last year.
Yeah, it's gone operational in December, and we've got customers installing at the moment, which is fantastic.
It's exciting times.
It is.
Now, and also you mentioned it's a very similar footprint to this data center we're in now, and that's because it just makes sense to have similar design and build for your data centers there.
Yeah, so fundamentally what we try to do as we scale globally is to provide our customers a very consistent platform.
Yeah.
So if you're utilising us in Sydney, you can leverage us in London, you can leverage us in Singapore, and you can leverage us in Melbourne, and get a very similar architecture and a very similar capability. So as you build your IT architecture, you can leverage that across a consistent platform and roll out your solutions with that innovation and the guarantee that you're going to be able to deliver the services that you want exactly the same in one market as in another.
So obviously all of those particular skills and the high level of privacy and security are all crucial factors in getting these sorts of high level customers. What else is driving your growth and has driven your growth?
Sure. So I guess the way I look at it is there's some fundamentals to our global platform. Obviously we provide world-class data center facilities that we've designed, built, construct and then fundamentally operate. So that's a key part of it. Moving on from there, we have a lot of trends that are occurring inside the industry today. So obviously we understand the drive to the Internet of Everything.
Yeah.
That is certainly a
the
very
latest
strong
buzzword.
one.
Everyone loves it.
Absolutely. I can give you another buzzword. Big data is certainly an environment. The one that we see leading at this point in Australia, as an example, is the drive towards hybrid multi-cloud.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk about hybrid cloud in 2014, and clearly it's only maturing in 2015 and going to become much more in demand.
Correct. So what we're seeing is IT enterprises want to leverage their existing architecture, some of their the bespoke custom apps, which may have to stay on their own platforms. They then maybe want to leverage public cloud providers. They may want to leverage some private cloud providers. And what they're finding is that they're having struggles doing that inside of their existing architecture designs. And they ultimately need to select a location where they can directly connect into those platform providers. So we've seen some real performance improvements as people have moved away from leveraging just normal public internet access to moving towards a business-grade private interconnection point where you can get secure, low latency, high-speed access into these platforms, which truly enables that hybrid cloud move. And I think we saw elements of it in 2014. I think we're going to see an acceleration in 2015.
Sure, I should know this, but does Equinix provide any consulting services to these companies to help them integrate all of that, or do you hand it off to other integrators?
So a bit of both. So we provide a service we call our Global Solutions Architecture team, and these guys actually will sit there and help a CIO work out potentially what options they may consider in their architecture. So considering things like how you could leverage cloud service providers, or how you should leverage the network, or how you should architect your solution considering you want a Pan-Asian exposure for your end users, and optimizing your user experience and making sure your architecture is as flexible into the future as possible is something our solutions architecture team can do. In addition to that, we also offer what we call a Solutions Validation Center, which fundamentally is an environment in numerous countries around the world where you can load your application up, test it, make sure it's going to operate the way you expect, make sure it's going to be as flexible as you require, leverages all the cloud platforms in those locations, and lets you spin it up before you actually have to enter the market. So our solutions architecture team can help wrap that up. We also do work with a number of companies that consult on broader services, and fundamentally we see ourselves as the platform that enables those companies to roll out that solution.
As you're talking about all of that, I'm thinking of the NBN, but I'm also thinking that this data center and data centers of this type must have gigabits or terabits. I mean, just unless it's top secret, what's the sort of connectivity that has to feed each one of these mega data centers?
So perhaps the best way to look at it is considering that, as an example, in Sydney we have 130 network service providers. So when we say we have 130 network service providers, they've all individually brought their own equipment in. A lot of them have brought their own fibre in off the streets. These are some of the most connected data centres, most connected buildings in the entire world. And fundamentally, the amount of throughput capacity in here is very significant for Australia.
Mind-blowing. So does the old adage of, build it and they will come ring true, or is there still a lot of hard work to get the message out? Or a bit of both, really?
So for us, fundamentally, we see the platforms that we enable as really quite helpful to global enterprises, and we're starting to see that now with the hybrid multi-cloud architectures.
People must be coming to you saying, well, we know you provide these services.
Correct. So one of the things that we do is we listen very closely to our customers, and Melbourne is an example of listening exactly that. So a lot of our customers requested that we open a capability down in Melbourne to extend our platform down there. This is a continuation for us around the world. Numerous locations we're entering, Osaka as an example, and Jakarta is another one. Dubai was recent as well for us. So there's a number of markets that we're opening up into, led by our customers' requests to extend our platform and the platform capability into those new opportunity markets for them.
You've obviously spoken a lot about the value that customers get from Equinix and a lot about the technical capabilities, but are there any other aspects of Equinix's technological prowess that we should know about?
So perhaps one of the new ones that I see a lot of companies will leverage into 2015 is our cloud exchange platform. We've talked already a bit about hybrid multi-cloud.
Yeah.
So architectures for new IT, for enterprise organizations today are considering how I could leverage cloud service providers. Now what we're finding very clearly, and we actually did a study on this recently, and I've got some of the stats here.
Sure, please.
One of them is that 85% of companies, Australian companies, when we surveyed about 101 Australian enterprises with an independent survey company, 85% are planning on multiple cloud deployments in 2015.
It's like having multiple backups, isn't it, in a sense?
It's multiple backups, but also it's different workloads.
Well, that's
so
true, of course.
Leveraging different workloads across different platforms is something that these companies certainly want to take advantage of.
And they have the ability to do this. This would have unheard of years ago, and now I'll use this cloud platform for that. I'll use this one for something else.
Correct.
We've never had it so good.
Exactly. So one of the areas that we've spent a lot of focus on is to enable that even further. So whilst we already have them available inside the data centers, we've also created our cloud exchange platform, which enables one-to-many connectivity to these cloud partners. So you can connect into our cloud exchange platform, and through our software-defined networking service orchestration platform, you can leverage all the different cloud providers in a very seamless fashion, scale your architecture, and then replicate again when you go to a new market. So that's perhaps one of the more technical advancements that you're seeing from Equinix in this space.
Sure. Are there any other interesting stats that you
I think
sharing?
many other stats that are very interesting. One of the ones here that's particularly relevant to me, back to hybrid cloud architectures. Nearly 89% of the respondents said that the most critical thing for them is high bandwidth connectivity, high bandwidth secure connectivity to these cloud platforms. So again, when you consider, they're considering multi-cloud environments, they need high capacity, low latency, high security links. You want to be right at the edge, right where those clouds come to connect, and a cloud exchange platform like the one that we're operating in our markets around the world is going to be perfect to leverage that hybrid cloud architecture.
Just a question off the top of my head. Do some of the world's major content distribution networks work with data center companies like yourself, or do they have their own data centers?
It depends. Companies have different models depending on the different environments they're in. It would be safe to say that a lot of large content delivery networks will leverage Equinix around the world in different locations.
Yeah. Well, if the infrastructure's there, why not use it? Well, that's a pretty impressive summary of a lot of what Equinix is doing in the Australian market. A sort of final mega question for you: how do you see Australian companies further embracing what Equinix already is offering beyond what you've told us? And then, do you have any final messages for iTWire readers, but also for your current and potential customers? So that's a mega question.
Mega question.
It's
mega
like deal or no deal. Mega guess.
Very good.
Very silly, but yeah, sorry.
No problem. So from the perspective of what I see for the future, I think companies are becoming very, very smart about how they're operating their IT environments.
Well, they need to. It's about saving money, saving bandwidth.
Correct. The old adage, more with less, I think just every CIO would resonate with that argument.
It's never been more appropriate.
Correct. What we see and what we're starting to see permeate through enterprise customers today is that they are understanding that what their architecture is today is probably going to change very quickly over the next few years. So what we see them trying to do is leverage the flexibility. And I think that's the key bit. They want flexibility. So a lot of them are sitting there going, well, if I've got a closed architecture where I'm just leveraging one service provider and one internal private cloud or my virtualized services, that's probably not enough. And what you need to consider is leveraging what we call a performance hub. where you can come and actually instigate your architecture into a neutral environment where you can pick up numerous carriers, you can pick up numerous cloud providers, you can innovate in your IT architecture, and you can truly advance your model into the future. And I think that's the acceleration we're going to see in 2015. That companies are going to truly come out of the closet from that perspective, that their computer rooms in their offices, and they're going to come into open environments and leverage hybrid cloud architectures and true performance hubs.
Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. I really appreciate your time.
Most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.